The first updates about Sarah Danh were difficult and uncertain. She had traveled to Japan for her honeymoon, only to suffer a sudden medical crisis that left her in intensive care overseas. But weeks later, her family shared the update they had been hoping for. Sarah was awake, off life support, and breathing on her own. On April 9, 2026, in Tokyo, Japan, 27-year-old Sarah Danh, a labor and delivery nurse from San Antonio, Texas, was hospitalized after a sudden and severe health emergency during her honeymoon with her husband, Luke Gradl. If you follow verified public interest stories and careful updates, subscribe to the courtroom, like this video, and share it to support fact-based coverage. Sarah and Luke had married on March 21, just weeks before the trip. Public reporting says they traveled to Japan for what was meant to be a celebration after their wedding. But shortly after arriving, Sarah became seriously ill. Doctors diagnosed acute liver failure, and her condition quickly became critical. Her family later said the situation became even more complicated. Sarah required intensive care, and reports described kidney complications, brain swelling concerns, and a stroke discovered after she returned to Texas. Authorities have not publicly connected this case to any crime or investigation. Public reports describe it as a medical emergency, and the underlying cause has not been publicly confirmed. As Sarah remained hospitalized in Japan, her husband stayed by her side while family members worked from the United States to help coordinate care. The challenge was not only medical, it was also logistical. Sarah needed to be transported from Japan back to Texas while still critically ill, a process that required an emergency medical evacuation flight. On April 21, Sarah was flown back to San Antonio for continued treatment. The flight was coordinated with medical support, and her family publicly thanked the doctors, nurses, and transport teams involved. But returning home did not mean the crisis was over. At that point, Sarah was still in critical condition, and her family was waiting for signs that she might wake from the coma. In the days that followed, the updates began to change. Her uncle, Kang Lei, shared that Sarah had shown small signs of awareness. She squeezed her mother's hand. She nodded faintly. She began taking weak breaths on her own. Each sign was limited, but to her family it mattered. Then came the strongest update so far. By April 30, Sarah was no longer on life support. She was breathing independently, moving her arms, wiggling her toes, and beginning to regain some physical strength. Her family said she had even taken a few assisted steps. Still, the recovery ahead remains serious. Public updates say Sarah continues to face challenges with speech, eating, drinking, memory, and motor control. Her family has said she is expected to need extensive physical and cognitive therapy after she is stable enough to leave intensive care. The emotional part of this story is clear without exaggeration. Sarah is a nurse whose work centered on helping others through some of the most important moments in their lives. Now, her own family, co-workers, former patients, and supporters have gathered around her as she begins a long recovery. The latest public information shows real progress, but it does not give a final answer. Doctors are still evaluating the cause of the sudden illness, and Sarah's long-term recovery remains uncertain. What is confirmed is that she is awake, breathing on her own, and showing signs of physical response after a medical crisis that began thousands of miles from home. For Sarah's family, the next chapter is rehabilitation, patience, and continued medical care. For everyone following the story, the clearest update is this. After weeks of fear, Sarah Danh is no longer on life support, and her recovery has begun. Thank you for supporting the courtroom and for following public stories with care, context, and respect.